Welcome back to the Deep Dig of Sports Pod. I'm your host, Drew. My other host right over there.
What's up? It's D. Good to see you again. Today we are talking about there's a whole lot of change in the league. Coaches are being fired, players are being traded at the deadline. But before we dig into anything, be sure to hit that like button, be sure to comment, and make sure you subscribe.
Yeah, we're getting closer to 500, guys, so please subscribe. The firing of head coach Dennis Allen from the Saints. Listen, first 2 weeks of the season, they were looking like the best team in the league. We're getting some MVP chatter for Derek Carr, but 7 losses in a row. You lose to the Panthers, who last week the Panthers looked like the worst team in the history of football. Like they could not get anything done on offense. Their defense getting shredded. They were incompetent last week, and to lose to that team in the fashion you lost, you deserve to get fired.
Yeah, 100%. To see this collapse as far as like, okay, here's where we were the first 2 weeks. We were juggernauts. We were thinking we are going to take the NFC South easily. Worst case scenario, we get a wild card spot. And then now 7 weeks later, it's like we completely fell off a cliff. And yeah, Derek Carr was hurt, but I mean, we've seen even when he's not been hurt, it hasn't played up to these first 2 weeks. And like, I think 100% the Saints just need to reset. And I think that's what we're seeing them do. I mean, they've fired head coach Dennis Allen. I think we're going to start to see them play the younger guys more. But I mean, we've seen that they're just kind of not good. So Jake Hayner and Spencer Radler, like, what do you do? Do you keep throwing out Derek Carr and just hope that like he doesn't win games anymore and we're just tanking? Or do you play the younger guys? I don't know. It's just kind of a lot. This is a lost season for the Saints. I think they need a complete reset.
I think you played Derek Carr for a while just to keep the train at least on the tracks, because this team is going to fall apart completely internally if you go back to Spencer Rattler right now, who we saw. I don't know if he's going to be a quarterback in the NFL, but he's definitely not one right now. He's not ready to lead a team. And I think that was part of Dennis Allen's downfall is Jake Hayner looked a lot better than Spencer Rattler in the times where he comes in to clean up these games that Rattler's falling apart in. And he just wouldn't move off of him thinking, okay, well, there's upside there and maybe he can make it happen. I don't know what the situation was, why they didn't go to Jake Hayner, but I think once the season winds down, you definitely have to sit Derek Carr and start thinking draft position. But it's just too early to sit him. And this team is 60 mil over the cap. Yeah, they cut some back from the Marshawn Lattimore trade. I don't know the exact numbers right now, but they're in a spot where they're stuck. There's nothing for them to do. They have to hope on some retirements. They have to hope on every draft pick hitting. And right now it's just they just re-signed fucking Kamara to a long-term deal. Taysom Hill is, I think, the highest paid tight end, highest cap hit next year. So I really don't know where they go from here.
I think you can't play Derek Carr. I don't think like as an organization, you don't risk your draft spot. You just keep losing. I think the team has already turned on Derek Carr as a whole. I mean, we're seeing it very vocally on Twitter. Michael Thomas, who was formerly with the Saints, just basically trashing him, basically saying that he was responsible for the Chris Olave injury. He threw him a hospital ball. Chris Olave's brother commenting and saying, yes, 100%, it was on him, that they're going to then blame the coaching staff. And then the next day, once they blamed the coaching staff and Dennis Allen got fired, Michael Thomas is like, see, I told you. And I think that's just kind of the sentiment in the locker room. And so I think you do have to go to Jake Hayner or Spencer Radler. I think we're going to see both of them the rest of this season. And you just don't, I think at this point, it's a lost season. What or 2 or 3 more wins going to do for you? You got to just stick with your draft spot. If you're going to tank, you're going to tank. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but at the same time, these guys are going to be on the roster next year. Like most of these guys have to be on the roster because of your cap situation. So you're really going to have a tough time turning around the culture and everything if you're saying, yeah, we're just going to let it really unravel. We're going to let it fall apart completely this season. I think even if they're losing games with Derek Carr, I think they're bad enough to lose these games with Derek Carr for a few more weeks.
Yeah, but the team already doesn't like Derek Carr. And so Why are we going to continue to roll out this guy and how you're saying create a culture of divide? Like, fuck it. Let's just cut this at the root. Just go ahead and do what the Raiders did. If the Raiders didn't have the respect for Derek Carr to let him play out the season, why should you, as the Saints? You don't owe him anything like the Raiders organization did. So let's just go ahead and cut it right now. Let's go ahead and roll Jake Hayner. Let's roll with Spencer Radler, and let's figure it out from this sense as far as what we have on our roster. I mean, realistically, it doesn't look great.
I think their only option is to roll with either Jake Hayner or even go to Taysom Hill, because if you roll out Spencer Radler again, I think if I was on that team, I would be like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, I'm really hitching my career to the Spencer Radler wagon this season when he's looked terrible.
Yeah, 100%. I think Taysom Hill, I mean, obviously, we've seen him before in like these spots where he can kind of rally the troops, and I think people like him and will rally around him. So that'd be interesting to see if they would, think about turning to him, because we know that really wasn't this regime's guy. It was Sean Payton's guy, and Sean Payton really believed in him. So to them be like, hey, let's go ahead and do this, I think it would take a lot of heavy lifting from the organizational standpoint. If I'm going to be completely honest, I don't see that being an option.
All right, well, let's talk about another group of coaches that are on the hot seat, because the Raiders, I don't know if they're going to really do this and fire Antonio Pierce. I was saying he could be one and done from the beginning of this year just because of that roster, but they cleaned house. They got rid of Luke Getsy. Who else did they get rid of?
Everyone, defensive coordinator, their special teams coach, they got rid of everybody.
And how do you get rid of everyone without firing the head coach?
Because then who do you turn to? Like, you know what I mean? Who's going to be the interim? Luke Getsy was going to be the guy, if realistically, if anything, but they let go of everybody. I think that this is a dead man walking, if we're being completely honest. You don't get your entire coaching staff fired and still live to see another year. You know what I mean? You don't get to completely redo hirings of everybody on your staff if you're going to stick around. This is your first year. You just hired those guys. You didn't even make it a year with this. So I think that Antonio Pierce is done. I think you're 100% right. And this is a one and done season for Antonio Pierce. It does suck, but I mean, I'm sure he's going to stick around in the league and be a defensive coordinator or something like that. So, I mean, we see it pretty often, but I mean, at the end of the day, if you're Antonio Pierce, you can just be like, it was the Raiders. And people will be like, yeah, that makes sense.
But I think it takes us to be we're going to win off motivation and vibes guy. It takes a patient owner. It takes a patient organization, and it takes really good front office staff. Because look at Dan Campbell. I'm not saying that, yeah, their defensive schemes aren't good and everything, but him and Tony Pierce are like vibe guys. Like, we're going to motivate the team, and we're going to get these guys to run through brick walls. But they gave Dan Campbell time to build out that roster with his culture. And I didn't see the Raiders letting Antonio Pierce build out his culture, especially without an offensive-minded coach on staff that really can get the most out of these players.
Well, not only that, it's not just, okay, Dan Campbell is a motivating guy who does X, Y, and Z. Dan Campbell also has been very, very strategic and very, very smart as far as who he aligns himself with. And look at, he has a great offensive coordinator and he has a great defensive coordinator. Both sides of the ball are taken care of, so he can step back and be the rah, like, I'm going to motivate people. But also, he's a very, very smart dude. Like, so him making those, you are who you surround yourself with. And Ben Johnson is like going to be this year the number one head coaching candidate. And we see that Antonio Pierce just struck out with his coaching staff. He surrounded himself with a bunch of guys that frankly just weren't good enough and couldn't shape this roster the way they wanted to. And yeah, I get building the culture and letting it stick out, but you surrounded yourself with poor coaching. And so that needs to be addressed. And that's why they've got rid of every single person on that staff.
And who can even come into this Vegas organization and turn it around? Because here was the thing with moving to Vegas. You're not going to have a local fan base. Every game there is an away game, because if I'm a fan of, say, like the Bengals and they're going into Vegas, I'm looking forward to that game in Vegas because I could tell my buddies, let's fly out for the weekend. We're going to watch the game. We're going to watch our team in a cool stadium. And that's every fan base that's not the Raiders. yeah, you have Raiders fans in California who can drive over, but I think you're getting more so the away fans there.
Well, yeah, and how you left Oakland was a big middle finger to the fan base. I mean, I think that a lot of people, once the Raiders left in the fashion that they did, felt like, okay, why am I going to support this team? Yeah, like Raider Nation, but like realistically, no, because you just told me I don't matter. So, okay, cool, I understand what you're doing, but you didn't have to do it in the way that you did. And so I think they lost a bit of their fan base moving to Vegas, and then they just didn't. We seen that Vegas, if you are winning, the people will rally around you, and you're not winners. You're the fucking Raiders.
Yeah, and we saw this coming from a mile away. But let's talk about there's two teams where I'm like, how the fuck did this person still have a job? Cowboys with Mike McCarthy and Doug Peterson with the Jags. Which one do you want to talk about first?
Let's go to Mike McCarthy in Dallas. I mean, that is a complete dumpster fire there. I think it's probably the biggest dumpster fire or the biggest disappointment in the league this year, where people were thinking, okay, it's the Cowboys, it's a weak division. They are still going to be at the top. They are still going to be a playoff contender. And it's just gone so awry. And so I think that's the biggest disappointment this year.
Yeah, and let me tell you right now, Cowboys fans, Trey Lance is the third string quarterback. He's not coming to save your season or save your franchise. There's a reason they're rolling out Cooper Rush and not Trey Lance for these 4 weeks. I'm hoping we see him at some point because all the hype that they really are bringing to him for being a third string quarterback. But this roster, much like the Saints situation, is stuck. They didn't get better in the offseason. They kept the same players and just paid them more and overpaid them because Jerry Jones' hands do get cramps writing checks. He took way too long. They traded for Jonathan Mingo at receiver, who's been disappointing in Carolina. CeeDee Lamb, I think, is banged up.
Shoulder.
Dak is out at least 4 weeks, and with a hamstring, which I felt like was a little bit, even with the Michael Parsons thing, I felt was a little bit. I think these guys could play, but do they really want to play right now for this team? Like how much are they going to put their body on the line for this team that they feel like is a loser?
Yeah, I mean, even Dak Prescott said it on the sideline and just clearly caught on camera. We effing suck. He's telling Trey Lance, we effing suck. And so they see the writing on the wall. They understand. And yeah, Micah Parsons went on his podcast and was like, hey, it's not over till the fat lady sings. We could still do this. But realistically, you know what it is this season. And you know it's a losing season. And a lot of people were like, this offseason, we need to get rid of Mike McCarthy because there are too many good coaches out there. There was Mike Vrabel, there was Bill Belichick, there was a plethora of coaches out there.
Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah. Why don't we go out there and get a winner? Why don't we go ahead and take that shot? And Jerry Jones being Jerry Jones, I think he super overcorrected from what he did back in the day, which was firing Jimmy Johnson when they were winning. He was like, okay, you know what? And he's been this way even with the Jason Garrett thing where he holds on to guys way too long. And there were just so many other options, and there's so many other ways in an alternate like multiverse that the Cowboys get a different head coach and they shape this roster a little bit better. But Jerry Jones also doesn't want to give up any of that power. Jerry Jones also wants to be like, I am the Dallas Cowboys. That is me. That is an extension of me out there. I want full control. And to do that, like to have Jim Harbaugh go in there, to have Bill Belichick, to have Mike Vrabel come in, that is relinquishing a lot of power.
Yeah, and I think they didn't address a lot of things that they needed to address. Like they refused to get a running back. They brought in Ezekiel Elliott, who I guess isn't showing up anymore. They brought in old Dalvin Cook, Rico Dowdle, who is a good piece, but he's not going to carry your whole run game. And they didn't give CeeDee Lamb any other help on the other end. Their secondary is beyond banged up. When you take Michael Parsons out of that defense, it's just falling apart. So this, like, let's just face it, this is a bad Cowboys team in a division that's become surprisingly strong with the Commanders and the Eagles. 1 week they look terrible, 1 week they're blowing teams out. the Giants, they're losing, but I feel like they're fighting in these games. So I really don't see why keep Mike McCarthy around. I think you need a guy to come in and bring a spark to this team, because you're not gonna really get much in the offseason in a different personnel. So you got to have someone who, I mean, Antonio Pierce available, get some motivation going.
No, I think realistically they should take a very serious look at Bill Belichick. I think they should take a very serious look at Mike Vrabel, Ben Johnson. Like they need someone in there that can actually help this team. Mike McCarthy lied about his credentials when getting the job. He said I had watched every single game this season, and then in the press conference, he's like, "Yeah, I kind of lied. I didn't really watch that much tape." And it's like, dude, if that's what we're starting off with, like, what are we doing here? And they just kept him. Like they were just content with being that, and being content gets you where you need to be. You get knocked on your ass, and I mean, it's not a strong division. I get that the Commanders are looking a lot better and they made moves this past week to really bolster, and they believe that they can make a deep playoff run. But the rest of the division, the Giants aren't good. The Eagles, they played the Browns, the Giants, the Bengals, and the Jags. It's not a murderer's row to list off 4 wins. So I don't believe that they are that good. The Cowboys could have made a run this year, but instead they got a whole lot worse.
Yeah, in a year when I think they could have potentially been the second best team in the NFC, like the Lions for sure locking that up. Niners have definitely fallen off. Could they have, with this talent that they have, could they have competed with the Packers? Like, who in the NFC other than the Lions is really stepping up to make a push this season? I don't see a lot of teams, and so you have to be Dallas. Like, if Dallas fans looking at this, like, man, if we would have been able to dominate the regular season and got hot at the end of the year, who knows what could have happened? So, yeah, I think it's bad timing for Jerry Jones to really fuck this roster up, and Mike McCarthy to really not be able to get them over the hump. But the Jag situation right now, they were getting blown out by the Eagles this week. I know the score was close, but I think it was 22-0, and then a freak play by Saquon fumbling the ball from the ground happened and just started to turn around. And Eagles started to unravel. But Doug Peterson and this Trevor Lawrence combination just doesn't work. I don't know whether it's Trevor or Doug more, but this is a team that is underperforming. They are not really hopeful on this future. They felt amazing about ETN last year. Then now they're like, okay, but Tank Bigsby's better. They drafted Brian Thomas Jr., who looks like a stud receiver. Trevor Lawrence was supposed to be a generational talent, and he just looks average. The defense, they've really invested in it, but they're not a dominant defense. So I don't see what the key positives for this team are and why keep Doug Peterson around any longer than today.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, this is just kind of what the Jags are, and it's a middling NFL franchise. I mean, that's why they ship them to London every year. That's why they have to overpay mid players to stay there. I mean, look at what they've done with the roster, and everyone's like, oh, okay, like, yeah, they have the cap room, but it's like you shouldn't have to pay guys like Christian Kirk the best salary of any wide receiver of the, you know what I mean? So it's like, there's a reason why this Jags team just continues to have a stink on them. And I don't think that Trevor Lawrence can overcome it. I kind of am out on Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. I think they are going to move on from him at some point in this contract, but expect to bounce back wherever he goes. I mean, this is kind of just how it feels. And I don't know what kind of coach you go for with this next route, because you got a guy, Doug Peterson, who was supposed to be an offensive guru, who's supposed to be a quarterback whisperer, a guy that can get the most out of the quarterback. Do you now switch it and be like, okay, well, let's go like something super defensive and let's go Brian Flores. Let's do something completely different than what we've done these past few years and just load up, because we have invested a ton of draft picks into this defense. We need to get the most out of this. Or do you just load up and hope Trevor Lawrence ends up being the guy that you thought he was, which was a generational talent?
Yeah, I think you got to go defense. I think if you're going to keep Trevor as the guy, he is a guy who can put up numbers once in a while, but he throws picks, he fumbles the ball. I think you should go defensive here, and on offense, find an identity. Like when you think of the Jags offense, I really don't know what to say they are, because one week they're trying to throw 100 times to get Trevor to win the game. The next week they just want to run the ball nonstop. And I don't think they have a feel out there for what they're supposed to be doing or what they're good at. And so they really need a coach to come in, establish the identity on offense, scheme up the defense, and win kind of this Jim Harbaugh style of game.
Yeah. And that's what they were going to try to do with Urban Meyer, but obviously that didn't work out. And so it's going to be weird establishing a new culture in Jacksonville. I think any person that steps into that organization is going to have just a tough time. It feels like Jacksonville is just kind of a revolving door, a waiting room to be mediocre.
Yeah, I don't see it changing anytime soon.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about some people changing teams. The trade deadline for the NFL has passed. Some of the notable trades, we have Marshawn Lattimore going from the Saints to Washington. A week ago, Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, Amari Cooper all getting traded. Deontay Johnson, Mike Williams, Jonathan Mingo to Dallas. A couple running backs, Cam Akers went to Minnesota. Khalil Herbert goes to Cincinnati. Zadarius Smith to Detroit. Preston Smith to Pittsburgh. Josh Uche to Kansas City. Tre'Davious White to Baltimore. That's just a couple of the names. Do any of these stand out to you? Because I think my main takeaway still is, why are we helping the Kansas City Chiefs? Why are we giving them DeAndre Hopkins? Why are we giving them Josh Uche? They should be paying triple. They need to be paying tax on what they're paying for these players. And other teams are just like, yeah, take DeAndre Hopkins, whatever.
Yeah, I think that's pretty absurd. The trade that does stand out to me, or the two trades that stand out to me, the Commanders getting Marshawn Lattimore. This proves to me that the Commanders organization, not just the fans, the organization 100% believes in Jaden Daniels, and not just believes in him for the long term. They believe in him this year, and they fully believe that they can make a playoff run. That they kind of put all their chips on the table. That was the one thing that they were missing. That's the one thing that fans were looking for. And they end up making a big splash at corner. I think that bodes 100% well for what this Commanders team like feels, not only in the locker room, but like throughout that organization. They 100% believe they can win.
And I think they can. I mean, I don't know about a Super Bowl this year, but this is a good team. And it's well coached. It's well put together. Jaden Daniels is a leader for sure in that locker room. And he's having a great year. I think going all in right now is a great move. And especially with Lattimore, who is still like in the prime of his career. I think he still has some good years left in him. So you're just adding a cornerstone to your defense for the next couple of years. And I think they could take that Detroit Lions jump next year where they're actually serious contenders, because people want to play there now. I think they have a true identity on both sides of the ball, and they're going to be able to draft correctly. They're going to be able to fill in slots with free agency. So great move by the Commanders.
Well, and yeah, and did you see reports were coming out prior to the trade deadline that it said multiple players, but I think I seen a number like between 10 and 11 players had reached out to their agents and said that they wanted to go to the Commanders. And so that's again what we talked about last year with CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans. Like people, when you have a young quarterback that people are excited about, players want to go there. They want to be a part of that because they understand that this is a guy who is special. And I think that's pretty awesome.
And not just that, Dan Quinn is respected around the league by the players. He's coached a lot of teams, so players want to go play for him too, because they know it's going to be how it's going to be run. They know how they're going to be treated. And then if you look at that division, Commanders could beat the Giants, Commanders could beat the Eagles, Commanders could beat the Cowboys. I think you're looking at a young squad who could potentially run that division for the next couple of years.
Yeah, and I really liked the Steelers going out and getting Mike Williams. I think that the main comparison or the main differences between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields is that Justin Fields really felt like the windows weren't there where Russell Wilson has no problem going up and throwing 50-50 balls. He knows that George Pickens can go out there and get it. And adding this piece in Mike Williams, who is a big body, a guy that opens up and you know that he will go up in there and fight for balls. I think that adds perfectly to what they're doing with the Steelers offense already. And this proves to me, just like on the flip side with the Commanders, where they're going to load up on defense because they already feel pretty good about Jaden Daniels. They feel great about their defense in Pittsburgh. And they're like, okay, well, if we add some more to our offense, we think that we can make a very deep playoff push.
Yeah, I fully agree. I've liked what I've seen out of Mike Williams in the limited play he's had for the Jets. And I think people are kind of disrespecting Mike Williams, and he was getting disrespected by the Jets by getting set down as like a fourth, fifth receiving option when he's better than that. The one of the moves I wanted to talk about was Zadarius Smith to Detroit. And yes, it's a good move, but I feel like they could have went even more all in getting Max Crosby. It kind of feels like, can we get Max Crosby? No, we got Max Crosby at home, and it's Zadarius Smith. If they get Max Crosby on this roster, I think they're the favorite hands down to win the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, I just don't think that was in the playing cards. I don't think that the Raiders were going to give up Max Crosby for. I really don't see them giving him up at all, because what then does the organization have? They don't have a player that they could hang their hat on and be like, that's our guy. At least with Max Crosby, you have someone to put on posters moving forward. You have a guy that you've drafted that you know is a quote unquote RN4L. You know what I mean?
Raider Nation for life.
Raider Nation for life. But you have a guy that you could hang your hat on. If you get rid of Max Crosby, it's just a complete organizational failure.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think he's going to be disgruntled. Like, he's not going to be happy. And this move's probably going to happen midpoint next season because he wants to play for a winner. This team is not on the right track to win or compete. I think his days are numbered in Vegas regardless. Why not capitalize now, get some good draft capital, maybe get a player in return from Detroit? Yeah, I don't know. I would have tried to pull the trigger on that.
I don't think the Raiders are smart enough. Like, realistically, I don't think that they are. Like, that's not how they move. I think that they are more than fine with being like, okay, we'll wait and we'll hold on until he's mad and we have less leverage.
Yeah. Another one I want to talk about: Deontay Johnson to Baltimore. I'm tired of watching Devin Duvernay drop easy passes. Deontay Johnson's going to bring a lot to the table for them. Zay Flowers, is that enough to kind of fix this receiving core for the Ravens?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think it's a good piece, but like ultimately they need to go out there, and I don't understand their thought process when it comes to receivers. It's like, okay, we're going to spend a premium at receiver. We're going to get the smallest fast guy when we know that Lamar Jackson realistically could probably do better with a big body, almost Mike Williams type of guy. Like, I don't understand their thought process in that. But I don't think this is a fix like completely. I think it's going to help out a ton, but I think that they need to go out there and they need to trade up in the draft this year, and they need to get one of the top receivers. I think they get T-Mac out of Arizona. I think that'd be perfect for what Lamar does. I think they need something. Even waiting and getting a Kyron Lacey, I think that would be a good fit for this Ravens receiving core. I just don't know what their thought process or what this philosophy is with their wide receiving core.
And I don't understand why they did not push harder for DeAndre Hopkins, because I feel like he's a big body receiver, possession receiver, perfect for what Lamar needs in the red zone, because I watched Lamar and this team struggle in the red zone to score points a couple weeks in a row. So I just don't get, with you there, why they aren't really pulling the trigger on that type of receiver. It kind of feels like they're getting the same type of receiver over and over again.
Yeah, 100%. And I just don't. Again, it has to be an organizational philosophy, but one that needs to change very quickly.
Yeah, a couple of running backs that I just want to touch on. Cam Akers, I think, is doing pretty well in Minnesota. He's adding to that team. And then Khalil Herbert has a chance now to be a feature back in Cincinnati because listen, I've had both running backs on my fantasy team for the Bengals all season, and to watch both of them struggle. Chase Brown is definitely better than Zach Moss, and now he gets the spotlight with Zach Moss going on IR. But I think Khalil Herbert is actually a good back who can slowly take over that job, and he's young enough to be their guy going forward. I think adding that run game element, can it bring back more passing game from Joe Burrow and potentially get the Bengals to where they want to be? I don't know. What's their record? Are they still pretty bad? 4-5. They have a shot to make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, and I mean the AFC is struggling right now, so like a lot of teams are kind of in that middle water. I think it's a good move. I think that it helps to add another dynamic. I don't know if it's a complete game changer, going to be completely honest with you. I don't think that it's one that's going to add like 10 points per game or anything and open up this offense completely wide. I think that they still have flaws, and I think that just adding this piece, I think it does get you maybe 1 or 2 more wins, and that is good enough to just kind of get you in the playoffs at this point.
Yeah. Any other moves or non-moves that you wanted to talk about before we head out?
The 49ers not getting anything really when people were thinking they were going to be, big game hunting. I think that's a team that they just feel good where we're getting our guys back healthy. We had the bye week. We're getting our guys back healthy. We're getting Christian McCaffrey for nothing. We're getting Jawan Jennings for nothing. Like, we feel good about our roster moving forward. We'll see if that ends up paying off for this team or if it is a detriment to them moving forward.
Well, they traded for the D tackle Khalil Davis from Texans, and they signed Tashawn Gibson, who I think in a few weeks should be starting over Jair Brown if he doesn't get his shit together, because Jair looks lost at times out there.
Yeah, and again, not to dig too deep into the 49ers, but I think that's coaching. I think that he looked a lot better last year than he does this year, and that has to do with the coaching. So it is what it is at this point, but I understand the want to move away, but I think he needs to be schemed up a little bit better.
Yeah, well, that's all we got for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and check out our college football stuff that we're dropping. So,
All right, take it easy.
should I redo the intro? Do we want any non-political?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
All right, ready?